Hey guys, this is just one piece of a multi-part course on assembling a Moho production. If you'd like to follow along with me and create a cartoon from start to finish, you can check out the course on toonfiles.com. Link is in the description. To begin, we are inside of Moho, and we're going to open up one of the sets included in the exercise files. So I'll use Control-O, you can use Command-O if you're on Mac, to bring up the import prompt. And we want to go to our exercise files. And under my sets folder, we have O1 exterior evil ship reveal. So if I double click on this, you'll find that we have the Moho file inside of this folder. So we'll just double click, and now we are looking at this new file. And there's not much to this. It's just a space background and we have a filter. And the scene folder is already established. So if we double click on it, you'll see that depth sort is set to sort by layers of depth and true distance. Let's bring in that evil alien ship, add some animation, some camera movements, and we can call this scene good. So let's bring in the ship by using Control-Alt-Y or Command-Alt-Y if you're on Mac. And we want to go back to that exercise files folder. And this time I'm going to jump over to the ships folder and locate Evil Alien Ship version 2 and then double click on the Moho file inside of that folder. Now you'll get an insert object prompt, and there are two files you could bring in. We want to bring in the 3D ship. I just left the 2D ship in that file in case if you wanted to look at it and alter it and build it up a different way. But we're just going to grab the 3D ship for this course and then click OK. The 3D ship is now within the scene. But if we look at the layers, you can see that it's outside of the scene folder. So let's make sure that we bring 3D ship inside of the scene folder just like that. The other thing we can do is grab the transform layer tool and push the ship out. Now we can choose just how far we want to push it out, and I'm using the Z property right here along with my mouse wheel. If you wanted to, you could put in numbers manually like -7 and whatever you want to alter this. But you can see we can push it back as far as about -10 before it goes away, and that's because then the background layer is actually the one that's in front based on the distance that we've set up. So let's put this at about -4, and I'm going to grab the rotate XY layer tool or rotate layer XY tool, and still on frame 0. I'm going to come in here and reposition this so that it looks like it's in front. Now, you'll notice when I'm rotating, I'm getting this red color that's just appearing. If I hide the filter and then rotate, you can see I don't have that issue. So if you're having issues like that, it could be the filter or it could be different layers, but we can hide that for now just so we can work and get a clean view of what's happening. So we have the ship set up right there. I can grab the transform layer tool and maybe just bring it over a little bit like so. Rotate XY tool and maybe just rotate it a little bit like that. So now we want to animate this out, and we don't need it to be that long. We just want to set up context for what's to come next. We'll have this ship kind of floating across the screen, not really going fast. Perhaps it's more idling or just on patrol. And then we're going to cut to the interior with our hero in chains in this ship. And so we just need to establish this ship not only for the next scene, but for the chase that's going to come later. So that way we understand that this is the ship that our hero came from, and now he's being pursued by that same ship. And so I'm just going to make this a 3-second scene. And we're just going to have the ship moving across the scene during those 3 seconds. Since I'm going to set it for 3 seconds, and I know this, I can come down to the timeline and on the out frame here, reduce it to 72 and hit enter. This will allow me to also preview the scene over and over and over easily within those 3 seconds. Now, let's do some animation. We need to jump to frame 1 to start the animation process. I use the right arrow key to do that, and I recommend you do the same. Using the arrow keys to navigate the timeline can really be a time saver. So now, we want to come back and grab the transform layer tool, and we're just going to come in here now and click once to establish a keyframe for the transform property. And then we'll go to frame 72. And here we can come up now and start altering the Z and the X properties if we want. We can also drag this across like so if we wish, and then use a combination of this, so then we can use the Z property to kind of bring it in more like so. So right now we have something that kind of looks like this. Just the ship sailing along like so. I think I want a little bit more of an angle for this. So going back to the rotate XY tool, maybe we'll kind of do something like that. And then on frame 72, kind of angle it down a little bit more. So you're going to kind of have this sort of thing. But not only that, let's go to frame 36, transform layer tool, and maybe just raise this up a little bit. Just add a little bit more motion to it. So it's kind of like going like that. And that might be a little bit too dramatic now that I'm looking at it. So we're just going to grab the rotate XY tool again and just kind of bring the nose of this up a little bit more. So it's kind of like that. It's not looking too bad. Kind of gives you some different views of the action for this particular 3D object. And I might actually lower it a little bit on frame 1 again as well, just kind of like that. There we go. It's a little bit more subtle, I would say. And actually, I might want to do the reverse. I might want to actually show the bottom more on that up position. So it's kind of like that. So you kind of have this going on. Now, one thing I don't like with the movement is the fact that it starts off slower, speeds up a little bit, and then slows down. This is called smooth interpolation. It's what Moho does by default, and sometimes it's just fine. But for something like this, I feel like we are just jumping into the middle of this ship's movement, and I feel linear would be more appropriate for that movement. So just to demonstrate, let me show you the movement of this again. This is with smooth turned on. You can kind of see it has like a, definitely at the end, a slowdown effect. And we don't really want that. It's not coming to a stop at the end of this. We are assuming it's just going to keep floating. And so linear is going to work best. So to turn this on, I'm just going to highlight all the keyframes, except for frame 0's keyframe, although it doesn't matter, I guess, if you would highlight frame 0's keyframe, but we're just going to go from 1 to 72, just like that. Right-click on any of those keyframes, and then choose linear from the list, right below smooth. So just click on linear, and now if we were to preview this, you can see it kind of looks like that. Again, I think this transition here is a little bit too abrupt, so I'm just going to go back to frame 36 and adjust the XY rotation a little bit more. And if you adjust it, we can just make sure it's still set to linear, just like that. And maybe it's more about reducing this as well. There we go. I think that looks a little bit better. So with that, we have some nice little movement here. I also want to animate out the engine lights that are behind the ship. And we can just do some simple things to help with the movement of all this. So under 3D ship, we can go down and locate the flares. We have yellow flare 2 and yellow flare. And we'll start with the second one since that's the one on top. And I will grab the transform layer tool. And this time, I want to come on the outside of this bound until we can see the rotation icon underneath the cursor. It looks like a half circle with an arrow. Just click once, and that will establish a key then for the rotation. And then we're going to go all the way to 72. And I'm just going to rotate clockwise. And we'll go about like so. And you'll see here my angle is set to negative 234. And you can see it starts at around negative 45. So if we play this out, it's kind of hard to get a good idea of what it's doing, but it will just kind of give us a little bit more motion to work with. And I might also convert that over to linear as well, just like that. So it's kind of like this now. I think that looks better. Let's do the same for the yellow flare on the other side. I'll click on it, and on frame 1, we'll click on rotation. And this time, I'm going to go counterclockwise. So just rotate it down like so. And then we can apply a linear interpolation to that. So you kind of have this going on now. Now, I'm going to add some camera movement to this. The camera movement can be done a couple different ways. First, we could go in and move the scene itself. Since we have all the 3D assets contained within this scene, you could actually just grab that scene folder and use the Z properties to zoom in and out. In a way, this gives you two different cameras to work with, because you could use that and then in conjunction with the camera, move things around and get it exactly where you want it. But to keep things simple for this first shot especially, I'm just going to do a camera movement. Let's go to frame 1 and click on the track camera tool, and then click once to establish a keyframe. I'm going to be pushing the camera into 3D space versus zooming in. And you can zoom in. If we use the zoom tool, you can see I can do this nice simple zoom. Everything zooms or enlarges according to us at the same level. So there's no real parallax or discrepancies with that. But if we were to just push into 3D space, let me just get rid of that zoom effect, go back to track camera, and then with the Z property, we start to zoom in. If you look closely, you'll see that it looks like the spaceship is separate from the background in terms of how it's zooming. We are seeing the ship zoom in faster than the background because the background is further away from us. And so I prefer this effect because it really allows you to take advantage of the 3D space. So let's start at about 2.9 for the Z property on this. And we're just going to go to frame 72, and using my mouse, I'll click and drag and just move this over a little bit just to kind of get this into focus. Now, I might just do a little bit more camera movement. Perhaps now at frame 1, I can just zoom this out a little bit more. It doesn't have to be a whole lot. And then just maybe move it over like that. So then when we cut, it kind of looks like this. It's looking pretty good. I'm going to go back to this 3D ship one more time and actually come in and get rid of that middle keyframe for the transform or translation layer property. So on frame 36, I did that little up dip. I just don't really like the way that looks. So I'm just going to do something like this, I think. Now, because of that change, I'm going to alter the camera a little bit more because I kind of want the camera to be following him just a little bit more. So on frame 36, I can grab the camera and just perhaps move it over just a little bit like that. And actually, I might do a little bit more here. Let me just remove that keyframe I just added in, just to play around with this. Maybe on 72, we can zoom in just a little bit more. Just kind of bring it in like that. So it's coming in like this. And I think that looks better. Okay. So one last thing I'm going to do relates to the engine lights in the back. Let's go down here again to those flares, and I'll start with the second one, the top one, just double click, and let's adjust the opacity so it kind of looks like it's pulsating in and out. And we can easily do this by adjusting the opacity within the layer settings, but to animate it out, make sure you enable animated layer effects. And on frame 1, I'm just going to enter 99 for opacity and then hit apply right down here. Just hit apply, and you'll see now that we are applying that opacity effect as an animated value within the timeline. So from here, I'm just going to do a few things. So let's just go to frame, let's say 18. Opacity, I can kick that down to 40, hit apply. And we're not going to be able to see it animate out, but if you page back and forth on your timeline with your arrow keys, you can kind of imagine how that's going to look. So it just kind of fades out a little bit. And then we can choose when to fade it back in. So let's say at frame 38, I'll bring it to 79, hit apply. Go back here to 63. We can go to 22, hit apply, and just go over now. Actually, we can just put that last one on 72 itself. So now we have this pulsating engine effect. Again, if you scrub the timeline with your arrows, you can kind of see how that's going to play out. And you could always animate or export a test animation too, just to see how it's going to play out. But I think this is going to work for us. You could also do this in still frames by using Control R or Command R. You can see here I can render out a still frame of what we are looking at here, and you can see that it's currently a little bit less bright on that side, which is fine. So before we wrap up, let's just do the other flare then for the engine. I'll just click on that, make sure that we enable animated layer effects. Go to frame 1 for the opacity. I'm going to do the opposite. Since we had a near 100% opacity at the start of the last flare, this one's going to start a little bit lower, just for some variety. So we can apply to that. Go to frame 18. Increase this to, let's say, 89. Oops, looks like the animated layer effects didn't take. So click on that, apply, try that again, apply. There we go. Not quite sure what happened there, but it wasn't taking the animated layer effect, but we got it now. So we're starting here. Let's go to 21, let's say, go to 89, apply. We can go back to, let's say, 34, near 48, and then we can do one more here. Let's put it like the 78, and we can click OK. So again, scrubbing back through, you can kind of see how that's going to look. Again, just kind of gives a little bit of variety to the animation. And we could go in and add linear, but in this case, I think not having linear is fine because the effect is a little bit different. And I think overall it should work for our purposes. So there we go. We now have our first shot set up to add some context for what's to come. We could add even more context if you wanted. You could animate some text coming in saying evil alien ship or whatever it is that you plan to address within the scene. I like to be a little bit more open-ended, I would say, with my narration. At least over the years, I've become more like that. Before, I used to be more explicit with things. But now, just showing the ship and then going into the ship and then showing the ship pursuing our heroes should be enough, I believe, to establish context and for the audience to connect all the pieces. The last thing I'm going to do is create a scene file for this. We have the set up for us, and I want to keep that set as a reference. I don't want to save over the set itself. It wouldn't be a huge deal if we did, but I just like to keep certain things separate. And so we're going to make a separate scene file for this. I'll go to File, Gather Media, and we're just going to go to our exercise files, and I'll create a new folder and name it Scenes. Double click on that, and we can actually just keep this the same name if we want to, but I'm actually going to name it something different just to differentiate it from the other file that we were just working on. So how about scene 1 ship reveal. Save. And in case if you're unaware, gathering media will just allow you to grab all the images that are in this file. So for instance, the background, the textures on the 3D objects, the flares, and it will put it all into one folder. So that way you don't have to worry about relocating images later on. Let's say if you open this up 2 years later because you want to reference something or you want to grab something and your image paths are broken. That won't happen if you gather media, if you keep it all within that folder that we just created. So with that said, we're going to pause here, and up next, we can jump over and start animating the second scene. If you'd like to learn all about character animation, assembling dialogue with your scenes, piecing scenes together, creating particle effects, and so much more, be sure to check us out on toonfiles.com. Link is in the description.